Please let me in. It's so cold out here.
The cold wasn't the worst part. It was their laughter, sharp, cruel, and unrelenting, echoing through the window as they locked me out of the house I had once called home. My husband's smirk burned more than the snow biting my skin, and my family stood behind him, mocking every shiver, every pleading look. Alone in the storm, I realized they didn't just reject me. They wanted me to feel
Out here.
small, invisible, utterly worthless. This is the story of a woman who was thrown out of her own home, humiliated by those she loved, and today, it is being retold by me, the one they tried to erase. Hello, family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request, please. Subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The cold wasn't the worst part. Sarah Bennett's fists pounded the heavy oak door until her knuckles burned. The snow cut out her face. The wind howled like it wanted her bones. But nothing hurt more than what she saw through that frosted window. Her husband, Daniel, sitting at the dining table smiling. Not at her. Never at her. He leaned back in his chair, sipping wine, while his parents sat nearby. Margaret, elegant as always in pearls and silk, tilted her glass and laughed. Edward gave one of his rare smirks. And then, Daniel turned his face toward the window, toward his shivering wife. He raised his glass, smirked, and mouthed the word, pathetic. Sarah banged harder. Daniel! Please let me in. It's freezing. I don't have my phone. Her words vanished into the storm. Her breath clouded the glass. Inside, they clinked glasses, their laughter louder now, sharper, like knives slicing into her chest. She stumbled back, the snow nearly up to her knees. This was her home, and yet she stood outside like a beggar. Her voice cracked. Please, Daniel, please. And then, as if her suffering were entertainment, Daniel leaned forward, tapped the window pane with his glass, and laughed. Margaret joined him, her thin smile cruel. Sarah pressed her palms against the glass. For a moment she thought Edward might look away, that maybe he wasn't as heartless as the others, but his eyes were like stone, unmoved. The wind roared, dragging Sarah down to her knees. That's when it hit her. They didn't just reject her. They wanted her to feel small, invisible, worthless. And as the snow swallowed her, the memories came rushing back. Sarah hadn't always felt like this. 3 years earlier, she had stood in this same house, heart pounding with joy, thinking she was the luckiest woman alive. She was a waitress back then, working double shifts just to help her parents pay bills. Life was small, predictable, until Daniel Bennett walked into her diner. He was handsome, wealthy, and every woman in town turned their head when he passed. But he chose her, or at least that's what she thought. Sarah, he had said on their second date, his voice smooth like honey. I can give you a life no man in this town can. But you have to trust me. You have to listen to me, and she had. He swept her off her feet, bought her clothes she never dreamed she'd own, took her to restaurants where the bill for dessert was more than her week's paycheck. Her parents, Helen and Robert, were thrilled. They kept saying how lucky she was, how Daniel was a real man, a provider. When he proposed in front of the Bennett mansion, her parents cried with joy. But even then, cracks had shown. Margaret, his mother, had looked her up and down at their engagement party, then leaned in and whispered, "We could have done better for Daniel. But if you behave, we'll manage." Edward hardly spoke to her, only giving curt nods like she wasn't worth words. And Daniel, oh, Daniel. He was protective in public, wrapping his arm around her waist, kissing her forehead. People said, "What a devoted husband." But behind closed doors, his tone was different. "You don't need a job anymore," he told her after the wedding. "The Bennett name will take care of you. Focus on the house. Focus on me." She had loved her job at the diner, but she gave it up. She thought it was love. She thought it was security. But soon she realized it was control. He monitored her phone, questioned every purchase, If she bought a new dress without asking, he'd sneer. Ungrateful. Do you know how much I spend on you? At night, he often came home late. When she asked where he'd been, he smiled, sharp and cold. Don't start with your paranoia, Sarah. You'll ruin us if you keep acting crazy. Gaslighting. She didn't know the word for it then, but she felt it, like poison in her veins. It was at a family dinner when the suspicion turned unbearable. Sarah had spent hours preparing herself, curling her hair, wearing the emerald dress Daniel once said made her look like a woman worth keeping. She wanted desperately to belong. The Bennetts' dining hall gleamed with silverware and crystal chandeliers. Margaret sat at the head of the table like a queen, Edward silent beside her. Daniel, of course, sat at the center, smiling for their wealthy guests. And then Chloe entered. She was Daniel's new assistant, young, tall, with perfect red lips. She carried a folder but stayed for dinner, and every time Daniel spoke, his hand brushed hers. Every time she laughed, it was at something he whispered too low for Sarah to hear. Sarah's chest tightened. She tried to keep her voice steady. Daniel, maybe your assistant should sit with the staff. The room fell silent. Margaret's smile was like ice. Oh, Sarah, you're being insecure again. Daniel needs Chloe close to him. She's competent, unlike some laughter rippled around the table. Sarah's face burned. I'm his wife, Margaret. Not Chloe. Daniel's voice cut like a blade. Enough. You embarrassed me in front of my family. He slammed his fork down. The clatter echoed. Maybe if you weren't so suspicious, Sarah, I wouldn't need assistants who actually respect me. Chloe's lips curved into a small, victorious smile. Sarah's hands trembled around her wineglass. She looked at her parents, sitting at the far end. Helen gave a nervous smile. Robert looked down at his plate. Neither spoke. Neither defended her. And in that silence, Sarah understood something. She wasn't part of this family. She was the outsider, the charity case, the joke. And Daniel wanted her to know it. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? The snow had barely melted when Sarah's world collapsed again. She sat at the small desk in the guest house, her laptop screen glowing. An email had arrived from an anonymous address. Her hands shook as she clicked it open. Inside were photos, grainy but clear enough. Daniel and Chloe. Daniel's hand on Chloe's waist outside a hotel. Chloe leaning against his chest, her lips brushing his cheek. And then, one photo inside a dim hotel room. Daniel shirtless, Chloe in his arms. The blood drained from Sarah's face. Her stomach lurched. For weeks she had suspected. The late nights, the whispered phone calls, the perfume that wasn't hers on his clothes. But to see it, to see him with her, it felt like a blade twisting into her chest. When she heard the sound of his car in the driveway, she snapped the laptop shut. She needed answers. Daniel walked in like a king entering his palace, his coat flung over the chair, his phone buzzing in his hand. He didn't look at her. Daniel, Sarah said, her voice trembling. We need to talk. He sighed. What now? She held up the laptop, flipping the screen toward him. Explain this. His eyes flicked to the photos and then back to her. His face didn't even flinch. Instead, a slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. You've been snooping again. Snooping? Daniel, these are photos of you with Chloe. At a hotel. Don't lie to me. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah, you're losing it. Do you hear yourself? Do you realize how insane you sound? You're obsessed with destroying this marriage. You want to paint me as the villain because you can't control your paranoia. Her heart pounded. I'm not paranoid, Daniel. I'm your wife. I deserve the truth. The truth? His laugh was sharp, cruel. The truth is you're unstable. Everyone sees it. My parents, your parents. They all know you've lost your mind. Tears welled in her eyes. My parents? They wouldn't. He cut her off with a sneer. They called me last week. told me they're worried about you. Said they are embarrassed by your behavior. Do you know what they said? That I should be patient because you're not well. Her chest tightened. That's not true. But deep down, a shadow of doubt formed. Her parents had been distant lately. Calls were shorter, conversations colder. Daniel's voice rose. You accuse me of cheating. You embarrass me at dinners. You can't even act like a proper wife. Look at you, pathetic, desperate, clinging. You think I'd want you when I can have someone like Chloe? Her knees nearly buckled. His words weren't just meant to hurt, they were meant to destroy. Before she could respond, Margaret entered, her pearls gleaming against her neck. Edward trailed behind her, silent as always. What's happening here? Margaret asked, her eyes narrowing at Sarah. She's accusing me again, Daniel said smoothly, slipping his arm around Chloe's absence like it was waiting for her. She's convinced I'm unfaithful. She won't let it go. She's spiraling. Margaret's face hardened. Sarah, this has to stop. You're ungrateful. Do you realize how lucky you are? My son provides everything for you. And this is how you repay him? With wild accusations? Sarah's voice cracked. I saw the photos, Margaret. I'm not making this up. Margaret's lips curled. Photos can be faked. And even if they weren't, maybe you drove him to it. A man needs respect, Sarah. Something you clearly don't understand. Edward's silence was worse than words. He only stared at her, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. Sarah's phone rang on the table. Her mother's number lit up the screen. With trembling hands, she answered. Honey, Helen's voice came through, hesitant. We heard you're having trouble with Daniel. Sarah's heart leapt. Mom, please, you have to listen. He's cheating on me. I have proof. But Helen cut her off, her voice sharp. Don't say things like that. Daniel takes care of us. He's been helping your father and me with money, Sarah. Without him, we'd lose the house. You need to be careful. Don't upset him. Keep him happy. The words slammed into her like ice water. You're taking his side? Over your own daughter? Her father's voice joined the line, low and weary. Sarah, don't ruin this. We can't afford to. Her hands shook as she lowered the phone. Daniel's smirk told her he already knew what her parents had said. She was surrounded, cornered, alone. And for the first time she realized, no one was coming to save her. The days that followed were a blur of humiliation. It started with little things. Sarah returned from the store one afternoon to find her clothes missing from the master bedroom closet. Her jewelry box was gone too. She searched frantically, only to find her belongings stacked in the guest house at the far end of the property. When Daniel came home, she confronted him. Why are my things out here? He shrugged casually. The main bedroom's being renovated. You'll be more comfortable here. Her eyes darted toward the mansion. Without you? His smirk was cold. Exactly. She wanted to scream, but instead she clenched her fists. If she pushed too hard, she knew he'd twist it against her again. That night she tried to pay for groceries, but her card was declined. Another card, declined. When she logged into the bank account, her name was gone. Daniel had cut her off completely. When she asked him about it, his reply was cruel and final. You don't need money, Sarah. You need obedience. Every penny you have comes from me anyway. Her phone buzzed. She opened social media and froze. Chloe was posting photos wearing Sarah's diamond earrings, the same ones Daniel gave her for their first anniversary. One photo caption read, "When a man knows your worth, he gives you everything." Another photo showed Chloe in a car Sarah once drove, Daniel's hand resting on the steering wheel. Sarah's stomach twisted. The message was clear. Chloe was replacing her piece by piece. She tried to tell herself she wasn't crazy, that she wasn't imagining things, but the evidence kept piling up. One evening, when Daniel left his briefcase carelessly open, she peeked inside. Her eyes widened at the papers inside, legal documents, financial forms, and then she saw it, her name. But it wasn't her handwriting. Her signature had been forged, again and again, on property transfers, bank withdrawals, asset agreements. Daniel was stripping everything tied to her name and putting it under his own. Her chest heaved. Oh my God! She snapped photos of the documents with her phone, her hands trembling. But the cruelest blow came the next morning. She drove into town to beg her parents for help, clutching the proof. When she arrived, her father wouldn't even let her inside. "Sarah," he said, standing in the doorway, "you have to stop this. Daniel's been helping us keep afloat. He told us you're unstable. We can't afford to lose his support." Tears burned her eyes. "Dad, he's lying. He forged my name on documents. He's stealing everything. Please, you have to believe me." Helen appeared behind Robert, her face pale but firm. "Don't make us choose between you and survival, Sarah. We're too old for this. Daniel takes care of us. If you can't handle being his wife, that's your problem." Sarah staggered back, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're choosing him over me? Your own daughter?" Helen's lips trembled. "We're choosing stability." "You should too." The door shut in her face. Her body went numb. She had no allies, no family, not even her parents. By the time she returned to the guest house, the snow had begun to fall again. The storm that night was violent, the wind battering the windows like fists. She wrapped herself in a thin blanket, listening to the howling outside. At midnight, the door burst open. Daniel stood there, his silhouette sharp against the storm's white fury. Margaret and Edward flanked him like shadows. He sneered. "What are you doing in here?" Sarah's voice trembled. "This is my home. I live here, not anymore." He stepped forward, his tone mocking. "You don't belong here, Sarah. You never did. You're a trespasser now." Margaret's eyes glittered. "You embarrassed our family long enough." Edward, cold and silent, turned the key in the lock. Sarah's heart raced. "Please, it's freezing. You can't do this." But Daniel grabbed her arm, dragged her to the door, and shoved her into the storm. She stumbled into the snow, barefoot, her blanket slipping from her shoulders. "Daniel, please don't leave me out here," she screamed, pounding on the door with her fists. He leaned against the door frame, his smile cruel. "Maybe this will teach you your place." Margaret's laugh echoed. Edward closed the door slowly, deliberately, as Sarah's cries grew hoarse. The lock clicked. The lights inside glowed warm and golden. Through the frosted glass, she saw them turn back to their wine, their laughter carrying into the night. Snow clawed at her face, her hands turning purple as she beat against the glass. But the only thing she got in return was Daniel's final smirk before the curtains were drawn shut. The blizzard howled, drowning her screams. She collapsed to her knees, frost biting her skin, the world spinning into white. And just before darkness claimed her, she understood the cruel truth. They hadn't simply locked her out. They had erased her. The storm nearly killed her. By the time Sarah stumbled into town, half frozen and barely conscious, she was more ghost than woman. A kind stranger found her, collapsed by a bus stop, and called an ambulance. When she woke, it wasn't in her home or even a hospital. It was a women's shelter. The smell of soup filled the air, voices murmured around her, and a thin blanket covered her bruised, frost-bitten hands. She sat up slowly, her throat raw. "You're safe now," a volunteer whispered. "Rest." But Sarah didn't feel safe. She felt erased. Within days, her humiliation spread like wildfire. Daniel and Chloe had posted online, painting her as violent, unstable, a danger to herself and others. Fake text messages appeared on social media. Messages she never sent, conversations twisted to make her look unhinged. "She attacked me," one caption read, signed under Daniel's name. "Pray for my family." "We've endured years of abuse," Margaret added. The world believed them. News blogs picked it up. Gossip channels ran with it. Overnight, Sarah went from the lucky wife of Daniel Bennett to the crazy, unstable woman who lost everything. She dialed her parents again and again, straight to voicemail. She sent texts. "Please, it's not true. Please talk to me." No reply. When she tried calling from the shelter phone, her father finally answered. His voice was flat. "Sarah, stop calling us. We can't do this anymore. You've embarrassed us enough." The line went dead. Sarah dropped the phone, her chest hollow. She curled up on the thin mattress and wept until her body shook. No family, no friends, no home. She had lost everything. Days passed in silence. She sat by the window, watching snowfall, wondering if the world would be better off without her. And then, someone sat beside her. A woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, eyes sharp but kind. "Sarah Bennett," the woman said quietly as though testing the name. Sarah blinked. "How do you know me?" "I've seen your photo in the papers. At those charity events. I used to practice law years ago." "Name's Grace." She extended a hand. "And I don't believe a word of what they're saying about you." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of warmth. She clasped Grace's hand, her voice cracking. "They ruined me. My own family turned on me. I have nothing left." Grace shook her head. "You still have the truth, and that's worth more than you realize." Sarah frowned. "The truth doesn't matter. Daniel controls everything. He forged my signature. He cut me off. Everyone believes him." Grace leaned closer. "Not everyone. If he really forged your name, that's fraud. If he really set you up, there's a trail, and trails can be followed. You just need help finding it." Sarah's heart thudded. For weeks she had felt powerless, but now for the first time, she saw a crack in Daniel's armor. "Will you help me?" she whispered. Grace smiled softly. "Of course, but you'll have to be patient and careful. Daniel Bennett is powerful, but men like him always leave evidence behind." Sarah nodded, her eyes burning with a new kind of fire. That night, Grace sat with her as she went through everything she still had. Her frostbite medical records, the photos of forged documents she'd taken, the emails, the receipts. Piece by piece, Sarah began to rebuild a case. But then one morning, as she scrolled through a gossip site at the shelter's shared computer, her breath caught. The headline read, "Daniel Bennett set to wed new love, Chloe Whitmore." The article claimed Daniel had filed for divorce, citing Sarah's mental instability and cruelty. Margaret was quoted as saying, "We are grateful Daniel found happiness again after the torment he suffered." Sarah's blood boiled. Her marriage wasn't even over, and they were planning a wedding. Worse, Margaret was preparing to sell the very house Sarah once called home. They weren't just replacing her, they were erasing her existence entirely. Sarah closed her eyes, her fists tight. She had been their victim long enough, and this time she swore she wouldn't go down quietly. Grace didn't waste time. Within days, she introduced Sarah to someone she trusted, a sharp-eyed investigative journalist named Michael Turner. Michael had been digging into the Bennett family for months. Rumors of tax evasion, shady business deals, and secret offshore accounts had crossed his desk, but until now he lacked the missing piece, the insider. "You're that missing piece," Michael said during their first meeting at a quiet cafe. His voice was low but steady. "You lived in their house. You saw things no one else has. If you're willing to work with me, we can bring them down." Sarah hesitated, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "They'll destroy me if they find out." Grace reached across the table, placing her hand over Sarah's. "They already tried. And you survived. Now it's your turn." Something inside Sarah shifted. For weeks she'd been the victim, the outcast, the erased. But now she had allies, and allies meant hope. From that day forward, Sarah lived a double life. By day, she blended into the shelter, quiet and unremarkable. By night, she worked with Grace and Michael, gathering every shred of evidence she could find. Her frostbite medical records proved she had been thrown out in the middle of a storm. Her screenshots of Daniel's forged signatures showed fraud. Emails from Chloe flaunting jewelry and cars once belonging to Sarah hinted at stolen property. Old texts from Margaret, belittling her, painted a picture of abuse. Michael guided her carefully. "We need a pattern. They isolated you, stole from you, and smeared your name. That's a story people will want to hear, but more importantly, it's a story backed by proof." Sarah's confidence grew with each passing day. She started recording everything, her calls with lawyers, her messages to blocked family members, even the cold rejections from her parents. Each detail was another nail for Daniel's coffin, but she told no one else. Not the other women at the shelter, not the staff, not even her parents, though part of her still longed for their support. Her comeback had to be a secret. Daniel thrived on control, and for the first time, she was taking it away from him. Weeks later, Michael handed her an envelope. Inside were glossy invitations to Daniel and Chloe's engagement party. The event was to be held at the Bennett mansion, her mansion. Sarah's stomach churned as she stared at the invitation. They're celebrating in my house, and I'm out here in a shelter. Michael's jaw tightened. Good. Let them celebrate. The higher they climb, the harder the fall. Grace smiled faintly. You're not going to stop them tonight, Sarah. But soon. Patience. Sarah nodded, but anger burned in her chest. On the night of the party, she couldn't stay away. She dressed in the plain coat the shelter had given her, pulled the hood low, and stood across the street from the glowing mansion. Cars lined the driveway. Laughter floated into the cold night air, and music spilled from the windows. Through the glass, she saw them. Chloe glittered in a red gown, her fingers heavy with jewels that once belonged to Sarah. She clung to Daniel's arm, her smile wide, her eyes triumphant. Daniel looked smug, basking in the attention of wealthy guests who toasted to his new beginning. Margaret swept through the room like a queen, her champagne glass raised high. Finally, she declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, we got rid of that crazy wife. Daniel deserves better, and now he has it. Laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked. Sarah's chest rose and fell, her breath sharp in the cold. She clenched her fists in her pockets, every muscle in her body screaming to storm inside, to drag them down in front of their guests. But she didn't move. Her face was calm, her posture steady. From the outside, she looked like a woman broken, but inside, fire burned in her veins. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the winter wind, this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Her eyes locked on Daniel's smirk through the window, and in that moment, Sarah made a silent vow. The next time she stepped into that house, it wouldn't be as the discarded wife begging for entry. It would be as the woman who owned it, and when that day came, they would all regret underestimating her. The morning of the wedding announcement dawned with a silence that felt unnatural. Snow blanketed the streets like a shroud, muffling the city's noise. But inside the Bennett estate, there was no silence. Only laughter, champagne corks, and the clinking of glasses. Sarah stood across town in Grace's small apartment, staring at the television. A news anchor's voice cut sharp through the quiet. This morning, the Daily Chronicle released shocking evidence against businessman Daniel Bennett and his family. Documents reveal widespread fraud, forgery, and allegations of abuse against his estranged wife, Sarah Bennett. The exposé, supported by medical records, photographs, and legal testimony, accuses Daniel of forging his wife's signature to transfer assets, while his parents, Margaret and Edward Bennett, are implicated in tax crimes and fraud. Sarah's chest rose and fell, her fists clenched. She had waited for this moment, this strike, for months. On the screen, images flashed, photos of the forged documents, her frostbitten hands taken by doctors at the shelter. Screenshots of Chloe flaunting jewelry that wasn't hers. Even a grainy video clip Michael had secured, showing Daniel bragging drunkenly about how easy it was to break her. The anchor continued. The Bennett family is facing possible investigation by federal authorities. Social media is exploding with the hashtag Justice for Sarah. Grace switched off the TV and turned to Sarah. It's begun. Sarah nodded, her face calm but her eyes burning with fire. They wanted me erased. Today, they'll be the ones erased. Meanwhile, at the Bennett estate, chaos brewed. Guests had gathered in the grand ballroom, where Daniel and Chloe were set to announce their engagement. The air reeked of wealth, perfume, roses, champagne. But beneath it, whispers spread like smoke. People scrolled through their phones, murmuring. Faces turned toward Daniel, then back to screens. Margaret stood at the center, her pearls gleaming, her glass raised. Pay no attention to lies spread by the bitter and broken, she announced, her voice sharp. Today is about love, about Daniel and Chloe. We all know Sarah was unstable. She's just trying to drag us down. But before the applause could begin, the doors burst open. Authorities stormed in, badges flashing, voices commanding. Daniel Bennett, Margaret Bennett, Chloe Whitmore, you're all required for questioning. Gas rippled through the guests. Phones were raised, cameras flashed. What is the meaning of this? Margaret shrieked, her composure cracking for the first time. "Do you know who we are?" An officer stepped forward, his voice steady. "You're suspects in fraud and tax evasion investigations. You're coming with us." Daniel's face contorted with fury. He shoved a glass off the table, shattering it. "This is a setup. She did this. That worthless woman set us up." Chloe clung to him, trembling. "Daniel, what's happening?" The crowd watched in stunned silence as the once untouchable family was led out in handcuffs. Margaret's screams echoed down the marble hall. Daniel spat curses, and Chloe wept into her hands. And somewhere, Sarah smiled. That same evening, Sarah returned to the shelter. She sat at the long table, surrounded by women who had once looked at her as one of them. Now they looked at her with awe. "You did it," one whispered. "You stood up to them." Sarah shook her head softly. "No, I stood up for myself, and now I stand for all of us." The next day, she received a letter from the court, her name restored, her rights reinstated. Ownership of the Bennett family house returned to her. She drove back there alone. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she walked up the long driveway. The mansion loomed, silent now, its lights off, its windows dark. For the first time, it didn't intimidate her. Inside, the halls echoed with emptiness. The grand dining room where she had once been humiliated felt smaller, weaker. Dust lay on the table where Margaret had once raised her glass in triumph. She walked from room to room, her fingers grazing the walls. She paused at the master bedroom, the place Daniel had banished her from, and then at the window where she had once begged in the storm. Her reflection in the glass was not the same broken woman. Grace met her there later that afternoon. "It's yours again," Grace said gently. "You can live here now." Rebuild Sarah shook her head. "This house is poison. It will never be home again. But maybe it can be something more." "What do you mean?" Sarah's eyes softened. "A shelter. A place for women like us, like me. No one else should ever stand outside these doors, begging to be let in. From now on, this house opens its doors to those who need it most." Grace's eyes welled with tears. "You've turned their cruelty into something powerful." Sarah smiled faintly. "That's the only revenge I need." But her story wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, her parents appeared at her new apartment, their faces pale with desperation. "Sarah," Helen began, her voice shaking, "we were wrong. Please forgive us. We believed Daniel because he supported us. But we see now. We see what he did to you. Please, we're sorry." Robert's eyes brimmed with tears. "We lost everything when he was arrested. We don't know what to do. Please, we need you." Sarah stood in the doorway, her posture strong, her eyes steady. "I begged you to believe me," she said quietly. "I begged you when I was freezing in the snow, when I was left with nothing. You chose him over me. You let him buy your loyalty." Helen reached out. "We're your parents." Sarah stepped back. "No, you were Daniel's meal ticket, not mine. I'm not your lifeline anymore." Her parents froze, stunned by her calmness. She closed the door gently, not with anger, but with finality. For the first time, she felt no need for their approval. Weeks passed, and the story of the Bennett downfall dominated headlines. Daniel and Margaret faced charges of fraud and tax evasion. Chloe vanished from social media, her once smug smile erased. Edward, silent as always, turned state witness, his reputation ruined. And Sarah? Sarah rebuilt herself. The grand house was transformed into a shelter, its golden chandeliers now lighting halls filled with laughter, support, and second chances. Women who had been erased, just like her, found safety within its walls. On the night of the shelter's opening, Sarah stood by the door, welcoming the first women inside. Snow fell softly outside, but this time the doors stayed open. Later, as she walked alone through the quiet halls, she paused by a window overlooking the snowy lawn. She placed her hand on the glass, remembering the night she had begged to be let in. Her reflection looked back at her, not as a victim, not as the discarded wife, but as the woman who had taken her life back. Her voice, soft but steady, filled the silence. "In the storm, I thought I was dying, but the storm only washed them away so I could finally see myself." She smiled faintly, turned off the lights, and walked away. For the first time in years, Sarah Bennett was free. and this time no one could erase her.
In the winter of 1885, amid the snow-swept plains of the Dakota Territory, a fierce blizzard raged against the rickety walls of an isolated cabin. Inside, Amelia Farnsworth clutched a lantern heart hammering in her chest. She never expected visitors on such a night, certainly not these visitors. Out of the howling darkness emerged 3 Lakota infants, triplets barely alive, wrapped in thin blankets and left at her doorstep. Against every warning to mind her own business, Amelia risked her life to bring them inside. Little did she know, sheltering them would spark a chain of events that would forever change her destiny. A bitter wind tore across the wide expanse of the Dakota Plains, flinging shards of ice against Amelia Farnsworth's cabin. She was a widow of 27, having lost her husband, Daniel Farnsworth, 3 winters before. Since then, she had weathered each storm in stoic solitude, stubbornly clinging to the patch of land they'd once worked together. The howling gale outside rattled the window panes as she huddled by the small fireplace, its flickering flames her only companion. That night, the temperature plummeted to a merciless low, and snow piled so high against the door that she had to push with all her might just to crack it open. Her plan was to make sure the entrance wasn't iced shut for good. If the storm trapped her inside, it could be days before she could resurface. Out here, near the edges of the small frontier settlement of Maple Bend, neighbors were few and far between. Amelia's face stung as she leaned out into the swirling snow. The world beyond her doorstep was nearly invisible, just a haze of white and gray ghostly, with moonlight filtering through thunderous clouds. She was on the verge of shutting the door when she sensed movement. A faint sound just beyond the cabin's steps. She paused, heart thumping. Could it be a coyote or a stray dog, or her imagination playing tricks on her? She peered more intently. The wind howled, blowing her dark hair across her face. Then she saw it, a small shape, almost fully buried in the drifts. Against every warning ringing in her mind, Amelia trudged forward, boots crunching through the snow, lantern raised high. She forced her way through the freezing wind, blinking icicles from her lashes. As she neared, a cry sliced through the blizzard, soft, pitiful, but unmistakably human. She froze her breath, caught in her chest. Without hesitation, Amelia knelt, brushing away the snow, and found something that would upend her life forever. Wrapped in tattered blankets were 3 Lakota infants, tiny, helpless, fragile. Their crying was strangled by the storm's roar. Instinctively, she scooped them up, cradling them against her chest. Panic and urgency flared. Had someone abandoned these children outside her door? Why Lakota families typically protected one another fiercely? Why here? Why in the heart of a raging blizzard? She wasted no time speculating further. Amelia staggered back to the cabin, precious cargo in her arms, fighting for each step in the knee-deep snow. Gusts threatened to knock her down, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Inside, she gently laid the shivering infants on her bed and stoked the fire, adding more logs until flames roared in the fireplace. She searched for extra blankets, faded and worn, and tucked them around the triplets. Each child was no more than a few months old, their cheeks reddened and raw. Their lips trembled. The sudden warmth made them wail in confused panic, but at least it was a sign they had the energy to cry. Amelia knelt beside the bed, speaking softly, though she knew they wouldn't understand her. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise you, I'll figure this out." Over the roaring wind, the cabin's walls creaked ominously, but as far as she was concerned, they were the sturdiest fortress in the world that night. In that moment, The fate of these 3 orphans became her sacred duty. When dawn broke, if one could call the weak, grayish light dawn, the storm was still raging, albeit less fiercely. Amelia had spent the entire night tending to the infants. She brewed a weak broth with the few supplies she had and used an old dropper to feed them small spoonfuls. She wasn't sure how long they'd been out there, but she could only hope her rescue had arrived in time. By mid-morning, one child's eyes opened, revealing dark, soulful irises. The baby let out a sigh that sounded halfway between relief and exhaustion. The other 2 were breathing steadily, albeit still looking fragile. Their tiny hands gripped Amelia's fingers, and she marveled at their resilience. "You must have some kind of guardian watching over you," she murmured, aware of how close they'd come to dying in that wilderness. Eventually, the blizzard calmed enough for her to see out the frosted windows. The plains were a vast sea of white with banks of snow so high she worried about even pushing her door open. Yet she needed help. Her meager supply of goat's milk and broth wouldn't last long. Besides, she was no doctor, and these children needed proper care. Maple Bend was a few miles east. The local general store was run by an old friend, Harriet Klein, who might have formula or supplies to keep infants alive. Then there was Doc Walters, the closest thing the town had to a physician. He was gruff and not always warm to outsiders, but in the frontier, beggars couldn't be choosers. Still, the question of why these infants were left at her door burned in her mind. Something about the unlikelihood of an entire Lakota family vanishing in the night was unsettling. The Lakota people sometimes passed through these plains on hunting trips. They were proud protective of their children. This abandonment made no sense to Amelia. She bundled the infants in spare clothes and blankets, placing them in a large wicker basket she'd lined with towels and linens for insulation. They were still too weak to handle a jostling sled ride, but waiting around was no option. She steeled herself, braced for the cold, and began the slow, arduous trek to Maple Bend. Each step was a small war with the snow. The wind whipped her coat. Halfway there, she stopped to check on the babies, ensuring they were still warm enough. After 2 hours of continuous effort, she finally glimpsed the outskirts of Maple Bend. Smoke rose from the chimneys of the wooden buildings. Her heart soared with relief. Maple Bend was little more than a cluster of a dozen buildings along a single rutted street. At the heart of town stood the general store, a one-room schoolhouse, a combined sheriff's office and jail, and a saloon called the Aurora Star. Snow draped every rooftop, and the air was so cold that no one lingered outside unless they had to. Amelia pushed through the general store's door, a bell tinkling overhead. Harriet Klein, a stout woman with a kind face, looked up in surprise. "Good heavens, Amelia," she said, moving around the counter. "Are you out of your mind, coming here in this storm?" "These children need help," Amelia explained breathlessly, setting the basket on the counter. Harriet's expression went from worry to shock as she peeled back a layer of blanket and revealed the Lakota babies. "Well, I'll be—" Harriet's voice trailed off. Her gaze flicked to the door and windows as if expecting some angry father or mother to storm in. "Where, how? Found them on my doorstep last night." Amelia answered, "They need milk, medicine, everything. I didn't know what else to do." Harriet nodded, flustered. "We have goat's milk powder. I know Dr. Boy. Walters has some laudanum, but I don't think you want that for children. We also have barley and wheat flour my mama used to make a thin porridge for babies." Amelia grabbed the supplies Harriet offered, ignoring the stares from a couple of local men standing near the shelves. One man, wearing a battered hat, spit tobacco into a spittoon. "Why take in those kids, Amelia?" he asked, not unkindly, but with raw curiosity. "Don't you think there's a reason they were left out there?" She stiffened at the implication. "Their children," was all she said. "They need help." The man shrugged, returning to his business. Harriet gave Amelia a sympathetic look. "People here, well, you know how it is. There's tension between Maple Bend and the Lakota on account of the last cattle raids." "I know," Amelia said, pressing her lips together, "but these are innocent babes, Harriet. If we let them freeze, what does that say about us?" Her eyes shone with fierce resolve. "That you have a heart bigger than this entire territory," Harriet said. She patted Amelia's hand, then leaned in closer. "Doc Walters might help, but he's always been particular about who he treats. Best go see him right away, before he's too deep in the saloon's whiskey." Amelia nodded grateful and paid for the supplies with what little money she had left. Then she hurried across the street to the small clinic building where Doc Walters lived above his practice. She knocked, and a moment later the door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with thinning grey hair wearing suspenders over a rumpled shirt. He scowled at the sight of the basket. "What's this, Farnsworth baby's doctor? And they need your help." She pushed her way inside. The place smelled of antiseptic and stale pipe tobacco. "They're Lakota. I found them last night in the blizzard. They're stable now, but I want to make sure they're truly out of danger." Doc Walters frowned, his gaze flitting from Amelia to the children and back again. He grabbed his stethoscope, gesturing for her to set the basket on a table. One by one, he examined the triplets, listening to their hearts and checking for frostbite. "They're damn lucky," he pronounced, after several minutes, though his tone had softened. "No permanent damage, as far as I can tell. Keep 'em warm-fed. If you see signs of fever come back, I can do that much." "But Farnsworth?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "You're biting off more than you can chew. We don't even know where they came from." "I'll manage," Amelia said, voice unwavering. Doc Walters merely shrugged, pulling a blanket back over the sleeping infants. "I suppose you always did have a tender heart. But folks might start whispering. Let them whisper." She looked down at the triplets. "I'll do what's right." By the time Amelia returned to her cabin, the journey twice as grueling with the additional weight of milk barley, and the triplets' dusk was settling in. The children had remained quiet most of the time, perhaps worn out from the ordeal. She settled them inside, carefully, feeding them a barley mix Harriet had recommended, and soon they fell into a more restful sleep. That night, as the wind still rattled outside, Amelia allowed herself a moment to reflect. Part of her wanted to leave the children at the local mission or ask Harriet to raise them, but a stronger part of her refused to abandon them again. Somehow they felt like a gift, though from whom she could not say. Images of the father or mother haunted her imagination. Had they been forced to leave the triplets behind? Was it an act of desperation? Sleep eventually claimed her, and she drifted off to the lullaby of crackling embers in the hearth. The next day, the weather finally cleared. A brittle sun lit the endless stretch of white, and Amelia used the morning to chop more wood. The triplets needed warmth, and she was almost out of firewood. She set them in a makeshift crib using a large wooden crate and extra blankets so she could keep an eye on them from outside. She was halfway through the stack of logs when she spotted a rider approaching Seth Bullock, the newly appointed sheriff of Maple Bend. A real-life figure who once patrolled the lawless enclaves near Deadwood. Seth was known for his unwavering principles and no-nonsense demeanor. He reined in his horse beside Amelia's cabin fence. "Mornin', Miss Farnsworth," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Heard some talk in town. Mind if I step in for a moment?" Amelia wiped sweat from her brow, exhaling a cloud of foggy breath. "What's this about, Sheriff? I'd rather discuss inside," he said, politely dismounting. She nodded and beckoned him to follow. Once inside, the warmth of the fireplace contrasted sharply with the biting cold outside, and a faint smile touched Bullock's lips at the sight of the triplets who had begun squirming. "I see the rumors true," he murmured, stepping closer to peer at the babies. "They're Lakota." Amelia nodded. "That's what Doc Walters thinks, and from what I can see of their features and the design on their blankets, I'd say so." "And you have no idea how they wound up here?" "No," Amelia said, crossing her arms. "I just opened my door, and they were there." Bullock scratched his chin, glancing around the simple cabin. "You have enough supplies to care for 'em. I'm making do." He paused. "I ask, because the Lakota aren't likely to take kindly to their children being out here, especially if they were taken against their will." He cleared his throat. "There are tensions. Some ranchers accused a Lakota band of slaughtering cattle last month. Folks in Maple Bend are on edge, and I worry if word spreads that you have these babies." He trailed off, leaving the implication unspoken. Amelia bristled. "Sheriff, I didn't steal these children. If their family comes, I'll explain everything, but I'm not going to cast them out into the cold." Bullock nodded approvingly. "I don't doubt your intentions, Miss Farnsworth. Just be careful. Sometimes good intentions in this territory are overshadowed by fear and suspicion." He studied her a moment, then tipped his hat. "I'll let you be. If you need anything or you hear something unusual, come find me." She showed him out, feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions in her chest. As the sheriff's horse trotted away, she caught one of the triplets, letting out a soft cry. She returned inside, picking up the nearest babe and rocking gently. "We'll be all right," she whispered, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "We'll be all right." Over the next few days, rumors swirled through Maple Bend. Some said Amelia Farnsworth had stolen the children, while others whispered that spirits had left them for her, a sign or an omen. Harriet Klein visited, bringing fresh bread and trying her best to keep Amelia's spirits high. "They'll come around," Harriet assured, rubbing her freezing hands over the fire. "Once people see you're just doing the Christian thing, they'll understand." Amelia wasn't so sure. She overheard remarks from the men who frequented the Aurora Star Saloon, words about half-breed trouble, and no good can come from messing with Indian brats. It made her blood boil, but she held her tongue. Facing them head-on would do no good and might endanger the children. On the 5th day after the blizzard, Harriet arrived in a near panic. "I came straight here," she said, breathlessly. "Word's out that a couple of rowdy ranch hands are riding the plains looking for missing cattle again. Folks are blaming a Lakota hunting party. Sheriff Bullock is trying to keep the peace, but it's precarious. If they find out you're harboring these children..." Amelia's heart clenched. "I won't hide them like they're criminals, Harriet. They're babies." "I know," Harriet said gently. "Just keep a watchful eye. Maybe if the Lakota family shows up soon, you can hand them over peacefully." A bitter taste filled Amelia's mouth. "Part of me wants their family to come. These babes belong with their people, but I can't help feeling protective. What if it's not that simple? What if the family that left them outside my door left them for a reason? You won't know until you talk to them," Harriet said softly, patting Amelia's arm. Then she lowered her voice. "I heard mention of a man named Robert Grady. He's a rancher from further north. He's been spouting off about forming a posse to search for raiders. I've seen what a few men with rifles can do when whipped into a frenzy. Stay safe, all right?" Amelia nodded, her jaw set in grim determination. That night, while the children slept, she kept her revolver loaded on the table. She had no intention of firing it, but she also knew the frontier's savage nature. She had lost her husband to an ambush on the open plains. She wouldn't lose anyone else if she could help it. On the 10th day, with the babies steadily growing stronger, Amelia ventured out to gather water from a nearby creek. She bundled the triplets in a wooden sled, tented with heavy blankets to keep them warm. She preferred not to leave them alone in the cabin. Given the tension in town, she didn't trust any passers-by. The creek, partially frozen, wound through a cluster of pine trees about half a mile from her home. Amelia found a small patch of running water, slipped on her gloves, and knelt to fill her bucket. Suddenly, a noise made her look up, hooves crunching on frozen ground. She rose, heart-pounding, scanning the tree line. There, on a horse so silent it seemed ghostly among the pines, sat a figure wrapped in a buffalo hide, a repeating rifle across their lap. Amelia's pulse raced, and she instinctively stepped in front of the sled containing the babies. The rider nudged the horse forward. She could see now it was a Lakota man, his eyes fixed on her expression, unreadable. He had strong cheekbones, braided hair, and an air of calm intensity. Slowly he dismounted, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. Amelia remained still, uncertain if he was alone. When he spoke, his voice was low and measured, accented, but clear. "I am called Many Horses. I mean you no harm." Amelia tried to steady her breathing. "Hello," she managed, glancing behind her. The baby stirred restlessly. His gaze flicked to the sled, and the slightest flicker of sorrow crossed his face. "I heard rumors," he said. 3 children, found near the cabin of a white woman." He paused, voice faltering. "I am seeking my nephew and niece's triplets." Amelia's chest tightened. "They're your family?" she asked. Many Horses nodded. Her relief was tempered by worry. If he wanted them back, she would give them. But was he truly their rightful guardian? She nodded to the sled. "They're alive, and they're getting stronger." She watched as Many Horses approached slowly, as if any sudden movement might spark conflict. With gentle hands, he pulled back the blankets. A faint smile appeared when he saw the children's faces. "Nashota, Tala, Luta," he whispered their names in an almost reverent tone. Amelia realized that each baby must have a Lakota name, a piece of identity she could never have given them. He turned to her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We thought they were lost in the storm. My sister, their mother, died giving birth. Their father, my brother, was away seeking medicine. The family that was watching them was attacked on the plains. The women ran for shelter. We heard they might have left the babies for safety, but we feared the worst." Amelia's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry. They ended up on my porch. I did what I could to keep them alive." Many Horses bowed his head. "We are in your debt." The father. His name is Kangi Scar White Crow. He is a respected warrior. He has been searching for them. "May I take you to meet him?" 1,000 thoughts raced through Amelia's mind. She didn't relish riding into a Lakota camp alone, but she also felt a strong pull these babies needed to be reunited with their kin. "I will come," she said softly, "but we must be careful. There are men in Maple Bend who might try to stop us." Many Horses nodded solemnly. "I have only a few men hidden nearby. We do not seek battle. We only want to find the children." His voice trembled with passion. "They are the last link to my sister." Amelia glanced at the triplets, sleeping peacefully amidst the hush of the pine trees. Slowly, she released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "All right, but give me one day to gather supplies, food, warm clothing for the children. I'll come at sunrise tomorrow." Many Horses agreed, glancing warily toward the horizon. "I will wait near this creek." Before mounting his horse, he looked at her, a question in his eyes. "Why did you save them?" "You had no obligation." Many would not. Her answer was simple, "Because they're innocent, and I know what it is to lose family." Something like respect passed between them. Then he disappeared among the pines, leaving Amelia alone once more. Despite the chill warmth spread through her chest, she had done something right. Back at the cabin, she wrestled with her choices. She could do nothing and wait for the father to come to her. But meeting him halfway might ease any tensions, might prevent hostilities. Yet the idea of stepping into a Lakota camp, especially with Maple Bend on edge, filled her with dread. Still, Many Horses' sincerity had moved her. She set about gathering food from her pantry, jerked, meat-dried beans, cornmeal, the last of her coffee. She also found a few spare blankets that might help. If White Crow wanted to keep the babies safe, he would need supplies. She had no illusions that the father would remain in these parts once he had his children. Likely they would leave to join the rest of their people, far from Maple Bend's suspicious eyes. After the chores, she penned a note to Harriet. "Harriet, I'm going to return the children to their family. A Lakota man named Many Horses came to see me. Please don't worry if I'm gone a few days. Keep an eye on my cabin if you can. Amelia." She left the note tucked under a rock on her front steps, a place Harriet was sure to check if Amelia was absent. Then she tried to rest, though her mind churned with anxious possibilities. Dawn brought a clear sky, tinted pink at the edges. Amelia fed the babies one last time with the barley porridge, bundled them securely, and fastened them in the sled. She loaded her horse Daisy with supplies and strapped her revolver to her hip. With a final glance at the cabin, her sanctuary in grief, she guided Daisy toward the creek. Many Horses was there, as promised, astride his horse. 3 other Lakota men were behind him, similarly wrapped in hides. They watched Amelia with quiet intensity, nodding in greeting. She felt her chest tighten, but forced a calm smile, determined to show trust. They led her along a narrow path, winding through rolling hills and clusters of trees that offered some protection from the wind. For hours, they rode in relative silence. Amelia kept the sled carefully balanced on Daisy's flank. The triplets stirred, fussed, cried, then fell back asleep. Occasionally, Many Horses looked back, asking softly if they were all right. By midday, the sun shone high, melting the top layer of snow into a slushy mess. They paused near a frozen stream to water the horses and stretch. One of the Lakota men, older and more serious-faced, addressed Amelia in halting English. "I am Firecloud," he said. "These children, we owe you much." Amelia simply nodded. She felt an awkwardness, a sense of crossing lines that were rarely crossed in that era. Yet she also recognized a shared humanity. She offered him a piece of dried fruit from her provisions. He accepted with a polite dip of his head. They resumed their journey, traveling across a wide plain where the wind whistled eerily. As the afternoon deepened, Amelia noticed shapes on the horizon, smoke trails rising above the crest of a hill. Many Horses gestured ahead, explaining that the band's camp was just beyond that ridge. The father White Crow awaited them there. Amelia's stomach knotted. She couldn't forget Harriet's warnings about cowboys and ranchers scouring the plains, searching for Indian raiders. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in the crossfire. Yet all seemed quiet as they ascended the hill. The Lakota camp revealed itself in a small valley, half a dozen teepees arranged around a cluster of fires. Several horses were penned nearby, and children in thick hides scampered about. A few women stood eyes full of curiosity as they saw a white woman riding into their midst with 3 Lakota warriors. Many Horses dismounted. Amelia followed suit, feeling every eye upon her. She carefully lifted the sled from Daisy's side, cradling the triplets. The hush that fell was palpable. Then, from one of the teepees, a tall figure emerged. He wore a breastplate made of bones, and his thick black braids were adorned with small pieces of turquoise. Across his forehead was a single eagle feather. She knew immediately this had to be White Crow, father of the triplets. White Crow approached his eyes, never leaving the bundle in Amelia's arms. She sensed his tension, the uncertain flicker of hope and fear. She slowly peeled back the blankets, revealing the 3 sleeping infants. A soft cry escaped his lips, somewhere between disbelief and overwhelming joy. He dropped to his knees, carefully touching each small face. The other Lakota men looked on, their features taut with emotion. A few women stepped forward, hands to their mouths, tears glistening. This woman saved them. Many horses said quietly, addressing White Crow in Lakota. Amelia caught fragments of the explanation, enough to know he was crediting her for sheltering the babies. A trembling sigh left White Crow as he looked up at Amelia. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. In halting English, he managed, "They are alive because you—" She nodded, her own throat tight. "Yes, I found them. They were nearly frozen, but they survived." White Crow raised his hands, pressing them together in front of his chest, a gesture of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he took the triplets into his arms, one by one, holding them close. Their little heads rested against him, unaware of the storm of emotions swirling around them. In that moment, Amelia felt a surge of relief and sadness. Caring for them had filled her lonely days with purpose. Now she had to step aside, let them return to their world. White Crow looked back at her. "You come to our fire," he said. "We share food." His English was broken, but the sincerity was clear. Many horses interpreted more fully. White Crow was inviting Amelia to join their circle, that they might properly thank her and see to any comfort she required. She nodded, managing a small smile, and followed him into the camp. A woman stepped forward, her hair streaked with silver lines of wisdom etching her face. Many horses introduced her as White Crow's mother, Winyan Tanka, Great Woman. She cradled each baby with gentle awe, then embraced Amelia, murmuring words in Lakota that Amelia did not understand. Yet she felt the warmth of the sentiment, welcome and gratitude. Night fell quickly, and the Lakota lit a large fire at the center of their circle. Amelia sat cross-legged on the ground, nibbling on dried venison and sipping a warm broth. The triplets, finally content in the arms of their family, slept peacefully. Many horses and White Crow shared the tale of how the mother, White Crow's wife, had died shortly after giving birth, weakened by harsh living conditions in winter. They had traveled searching for help, but trouble had followed them, a group of marauding bandits who attacked indiscriminately. In the chaos, the triplets had been separated from the larger group of Lakota. The mother's sister left them at the edge of the plains, hoping someone in Maple Bend might help rather than let them perish. "I never knew such kindness from settlers," White Crow said quietly through Many Horses' translation. "You have given me back my children. I cannot repay you enough." Amelia shook her head. "They gave me hope too," she replied softly. White Crow's gaze turned to the star-filled sky. After a long moment, he spoke again. Words that Many Horses translated, "I wish to honor you before my people, to show that we do not forget such debts." Amelia opened her mouth to protest, but saw the seriousness on White Crow's face. This was not a gesture to decline lightly. "I would be grateful," she said, not fully comprehending what it meant, but understanding the intent. The night wore on with the quiet rhythms of conversation in Lakota, the crackle of flames, and the occasional cry of a distant coyote. Despite the language barrier, Amelia felt safer than she had in a long time. For the first time since Daniel's death, she sensed a wholeness in her soul. Then came the faint sound of hooves, distant but unmistakable. Many horses and Fire Cloud exchanged alarmed glances, rising to their feet. White Crow's shoulders tensed. They listened, and the sound grew louder. Fear flickered through the camp. Men reached for rifles, women hurried to gather children and usher them toward the teepees. Amelia's stomach lurched. Could it be the ranchers Harriet had warned her about? From the darkness, a voice shouted, "Halt, show yourselves!" The flicker of torchlight illuminated a half-dozen riders perched on the ridge. A chilling dread crawled over Amelia. She squinted, making out the figure at the head of the group. Even in the dim glow, she recognized him. Robert Grady, the rancher, rumored to be leading an anti-Lakota posse. Tense moments stretched as Robert Grady and his men rode into the valley, rifles raised. The Lakota men formed a defensive line. White Crow kept the triplets behind him, passing them to Winyantanka with a protective gesture. Amelia stood between the two groups, heart thundering in her chest. She raised her hands in an imploring gesture. "Mr. Grady, stop! There are women and children here." Grady's face was grim beneath his hat. "Then the men can come out and answer for the stolen cattle. We've tracked them all across the plains. There's been no raid here," Amelia insisted. She gestured to White Crow and many horses. "They're just looking after their families." Grady spat. "Your word." "Farnsworth, these Indians are always up to something. Besides, rumor has it you stole some Indian babies. You've been meddling." Amelia's cheeks flushed with anger. "They were abandoned. I saved them, and now their father has them back. No harm is being done here." One of Grady's men, a tall, wiry figure, nudged his horse forward. "Grady, we've got no business listening to this woman. Let's drive 'em off. That's what we came to do." Many horses gripped Amelia's shoulder gently, as if to urge her back. She felt the tension rolling through the Lakota warriors. White Crow's jaw was set in a firm line. The men behind Grady fidgeted with their rifles. One accidental shot could spark a massacre. She steadied herself, voice shaking with resolve. "Mr. Grady, do you want blood on your hands? There are children here, babies. If you fire, you'll be killing innocents." She took a bold step closer. "If it's about your cattle talk to the sheriff, there's no proof these people took anything." The men exchanged uncertain glances. Some clearly wanted a fight, others seemed uneasy. Grady glowered, torn between vengeance and caution. White Crow stepped forward, raising an open palm. He spoke in halting English, his tone solemn. "No cattle. We not harm you. We not want fight." His eyes slid to Amelia, who quickly repeated his words, adding her own reassurance. "He's telling the truth." Grady scoffed. "Words. I've heard talk of big war parties forming. My guess is these folks are just the scouting group." "Use your eyes," Amelia begged. "Look at the children. Do they look like they're preparing for war? They're simply trying to survive." Behind Grady, a few men shifted uneasily, scanning the camp. The tippies, the small cluster of women holding infants, the calm but firm stance of the Lakota men, none of it looked threatening. Perhaps they realized the stories had been exaggerated. Finally, Grady sneered. "We'll be back with the sheriff. If I find one head of my cattle missing, I'll hold you responsible." He pointed a gloved finger at White Crow, then at Amelia. "You better watch yourself, Farnsworth. Harboring Indians that might be criminals, no telling where that'll lead you." He yanked the reins, and the posse turned away, disappearing over the ridge as quickly as they had come. Only after their hoofbeats faded did Amelia realize she'd been holding her breath. A palpable relief settled over the camp, though tension still hung in the air. White Crow exhaled slowly, returning to where Winyantanka held the triplets. Many horses muttered something about these Wasichu white men always coming where they were not wanted. Amelia's hands shook from the lingering adrenaline. She knew that if Grady decided to return with a larger force, the situation could escalate. As if sensing her worry, White Crow rested a hand on her shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze. They gathered in his teepee, where a small fire crackled at the center. Many horses explained that they needed to leave soon, lest the posse return. They could travel north, join a larger band of Lakota, who had an arrangement with the U.S. cavalry to remain peaceful on certain lands. But traveling with triplets in winter would be perilous. Amelia spoke her concerns. "I can't let you make that journey without enough supplies. The children are still fragile." She glanced at the 3 sleeping babes, so peaceful despite the day's drama. "Let me help. I have a cabin not far from here. We can gather whatever food, blankets, everything you need." White Crow seemed torn. He wanted to protect his people, but he also understood Amelia's sincerity. Many horses suggested a compromise. A few men would accompany Amelia back, gather the provisions, then return by nightfall so they could depart under cover of darkness. "Or stay in my cabin," Amelia offered, surprising even herself. "At least for a night or two. It's safer than being out in the open. I'll talk to Sheriff Bullock, explain the situation. Maybe he can keep Grady off your backs." White Crow and many horses exchanged a glance. Finally, White Crow spoke. "We trust you. We will see your cabin. But if trouble comes, we will move quickly." A plan formed. Tomorrow morning, they would pack up the camp, move quietly under dawn's early light, and head for Amelia's place. It was risky, bringing an entire Lakota band into proximity with Maple Bend. But with the drifting snow and possibility of Grady's return, there seemed little choice. Amelia only hoped that the good people of Maple Bend, like Harriet and Sheriff Bullock, would see reason. Early the next day, the Lakota dismantled their teepees with remarkable efficiency. Amelia marveled at how swiftly they packed all their belongings, horses loaded with carefully wrapped bundles. The triplets woke hungry and fussing, so Amelia helped feed them from her limited rations, mixing barley meal with water heated over the communal fire. White Crow watched intently, learning each step so he could care for them on the journey. As they set out, White Crow carried 2 of his children on horseback, strapped securely with soft hides. Winyan Tanker carried the 3rd. Amelia rode Daisy near the front with many horses. The group wound through gullies and stands of pine, avoiding open terrain where they might be spotted. Near midday, they reached Amelia's cabin. Cautious, the Lakota men spread out in a protective perimeter while White Crow and a few others approached the cabin. Amelia dismounted, relief flooding her as she saw no sign of intruders. She hurried to the door, calling out to Harriet in case her friend was inside. No answer. She found Harriet's note pinned to her table. "I see you're gone. Went back to town. Be careful." Amelia tucked it away. The Lakota filed inside, eyes scanning the modest interior. Winyan Tanker and White Crow gently placed the triplets on Amelia's bed, checking them for warmth. The men who remained outside began to make small fires and set up temporary shelters behind the cabin, discreetly hidden from the main road. Amelia gave them what supplies she had: flour, beans, salted meats, dried fruits. She worried it might not be enough, but White Crow was deeply grateful. He sent Firecloud and another warrior into Maple Bend to buy more provisions under the watchful escort of Amelia, who believed her presence might ease tensions with the townsfolk. They rode to Maple Bend's general store carefully. Amelia walked in first, quietly explaining the situation to Harriet, who looked anxious but nodded in understanding. Then Firecloud and the other Lakota man entered, stoic but polite. Harriet sold them what they needed: canned goods, cornmeal, and warm clothing for the babies, mostly old quilts, and second-hand children's garments from the back of the store. But trouble found them sooner than expected. Robert Grady, apparently lingering in Maple Bend, spotted them from across the street. He barged into the store, a hand on his revolver. "Amelia Farnsworth," he snarled, "what in blazes do you think you're doing?" Firecloud stiffened, but Amelia stepped forward, blocking Grady's path. "They're here to buy supplies. Lawful business." Grady scowled, stepping closer, chest heaving. "I warned you. You bring them into our town thinking we're all fools." Harriet cleared her throat, voice shaking but firm. "They've paid in silver. They haven't done anything wrong." "You shut your mouth," Harriet Grady snapped. He turned back to Amelia. "I ought to drag you to the sheriff's office. This is trespassing." Sheriff Bullock arrived, then, drawn by the commotion. "Stand down, Grady," he said sternly, stepping inside the store. "No law against them purchasing supplies. You got evidence of wrongdoing, bring it to me properly. Otherwise, you're the one causing a disturbance." Grady fumed. "Sheriff, these Indians are not welcome." Bullock's jaw hardened. "I enforce the law, not your personal grudges, Grady. Unless they break it, you have no grounds." A tense silence followed. Firecloud, who understood a bit of English, quietly handed over payment to Harriet. Harriet handed him the goods, glancing fearfully at Grady. Amelia exhaled in relief when Grady finally lowered his hand from his revolver. "This ain't the last of it," Grady warned, storming out. Bullock sighed, turning to Amelia. "Seems your compassion has turned you into a lightning rod. Watch yourself and get them out of here before trouble escalates." Amelia nodded. "Thank you, Sheriff. You're a good man." He scoffed lightly. "I'm just trying to keep the peace. Now go on." Outside, they loaded the supplies onto a wagon Harriet had let them borrow. Firecloud and the other warrior nodded their thanks, and Amelia guided them back to her cabin. Her nerves were taut, like bowstrings, anticipating that Grady might follow, but they managed to slip away without pursuit. Back at the cabin, the Lakota band prepared for departure. They had the supplies they needed, and White Crow was determined to move under the cover of darkness, heading north. The plan was to skirt Maple Bend, entirely avoiding a direct path that might lead to confrontation. However, White Crow pulled Amelia aside, gesturing for her to follow him into the moonlit clearing behind her cabin. Many horses accompanied them, translating. White Crow's words were solemn, steeped in the gravity of ceremony. He explained that the Lakota had a tradition of honoring those who performed great deeds, who showed courage and compassion for their people. Amelia, by saving the triplets, had done such a deed. He then summoned his men. One by one, over 100 Lakota warriors, some from allied bands who had been scouting the area, emerged from the darkness. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The entire clearing filled with men on horseback, some wearing traditional regalia, others in simpler hunting attire. She had no idea so many had gathered unseen. White Crow turned to her, his voice carrying in the stillness. Through many horses, he spoke. "We come to honor you, Amelia Farnsworth. You have saved the blood of our people. My children are alive because of you. Our hearts are full of gratitude, and we will not let such an act go unrecognized." Amelia felt her throat tighten, tears threatening. She glanced from warrior to warrior, seeing solemn respect etched in their faces. A hush fell over the winter air, broken only by the stamp of hooves and the rustle of feathers and hides. White Crow continued his tone, echoing across the crowd. "We name you Winyan Wawokia, the woman who helps. You are forever a friend to us." A murmur of assent rose from the warriors. Some pounded their chests, others lifted eagle feather lances. The intensity of the moment overwhelmed Amelia. She never expected such a heartfelt display of gratitude, especially from men who had every reason to distrust settlers. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she lowered her head speechless. The distant moon cast an ethereal glow, illuminating the ring of warriors. Many horses gently laid a hand on her shoulder, repeating the name Winyan Wawokia. White Crow produced a small leather pouch containing a beaded necklace, carefully placing it around her neck. The intricate design glimmered in the moonlight, signifying friendship and thanks. Amelia managed to find her voice. "I am humbled. Thank you." White Crow smiled softly, the shadows of his grief replaced by gratitude. One of the babies gave a tiny cry from Winyan Tanka's arms, as if voicing approval. The entire group seemed to exhale as one, a collective release of pent-up sorrow and tension. The moment of peace did not last. From the west came the telltale glow of torches. Grady and his men, no doubt determined to enforce their twisted sense of justice. The flicker of light grew stronger, accompanied by the thunder of hooves. Instantly, the Lakota warriors formed ranks, rifles and bows ready. Amelia's blood ran cold. She stepped forward, heart pounding, scanning the darkness. Sure enough, Grady's posse appeared at least 20 strong this time. Grady's eyes widened at the sight of 100 Lakota warriors. He might have expected a small group, but not this. His men faltered, pulling their horses up short at the edge of the clearing, uncertain whether to advance. Amelia mustered all her courage, walking to the space between the two forces. The necklace swung at her chest as she faced Grady. "Go home," she called out. "There's no fight to be had. These people are leaving." Grady cursed under his breath, but fear warred with stubbornness in his eyes. One of his men spoke up, voice quavering. "We can't take on 100 warriors, Grady. Let's get out of here." Grady's eyes blazed. He spat on the ground. "I won't be driven off my land by savages." "This isn't your land," Amelia retorted, anger igniting. "They're not here to stay. They're just passing through. If you open fire, you'll be the one starting a war." A tense standoff loomed. Behind her, White Crow and many horses waited, eyes, keen weapons at the ready. The entire row of Lakota warriors remained poised silent, their presence alone a testament to their strength. Finally, reason or self-preservation prevailed among Grady's men. Several wheeled their horses around, unwilling to face such overwhelming odds. Grady left, with fewer supporters glared at Amelia as though she were the cause of all his woes. "Mark my words, Farnsworth," he growled. "You stand with them now. Don't expect anyone in Maple Bend to welcome you back." But without enough men, he could do nothing. With a final snarl, he turned his horse and followed the others into the darkness. Amelia released a shaky breath, knees nearly buckling. She felt many horses' hand again on her shoulder, steadying her. "You have great courage," he said softly. She managed a small, trembling nod. At first light, the Lakota band prepared to move north. White Crow came to Amelia, holding two of the triplets in his arms, the third nestled with Winyan Tanka. The children seemed healthier than ever, cheeks flushed pink in the cold morning air. A faint smile touched Amelia's lips, relief washing over her at the realization that they might grow up safe after all. Many horses explained that White Crow wanted Amelia to have a keepsake to remember the children, a small pair of beaded moccasins that had belonged to the mother, a family heirloom sized for newborns. Amelia accepted them, tears brimming. She looked at White Crow, her voice tender. "Will I see you again?" He met her gaze, sadness and gratitude mingling. Different worlds," he replied carefully, forming the words, in English. But, you always friend. I come back someday, if the wind allows. A pang shot through her chest. She glanced at the triplets, each with a future that had once seemed doomed. Take care of them, she whispered. White Crow nodded, pressing a hand to his heart. Winyan stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Amelia's cheek, murmuring a blessing in Lakota. Amelia didn't understand the words, but she felt their warmth. Then, in a hushed procession, the band filed out of the clearing and into the plains, the silhouettes of riders and teepees fading into the snowy horizon. Amelia stood outside her cabin arms, wrapped around herself, watching until there was nothing left but the whisper of the wind. In the following weeks, Maple Bend remained uneasy. Grady spread rumors that Amelia was conspiring with savages. Harriet tried to quell the gossip, but it was an uphill battle. Sheriff Bullock, for his part, maintained a neutral stance, though many recognized he quietly supported Amelia's right to do what she had done. Despite the social chill, Harriet continued to visit, bringing fresh bread or just a friendly ear. One day, she confessed that some folks were calling Amelia an Indian lover, or claiming that she'd sold out the town's safety. Amelia shrugged off the insults, but she couldn't deny feeling isolated. She had no regrets, but the cost of doing right was high. She returned to her daily routine. At the cabin, living alone once more, but not quite as lonely. She had the memory of the triplets, Nashotatala and Luta, and the beaded moccasins. She had the Lakota name Winyan Walwokia echoing in her mind whenever she felt doubt creep in. Spring came, and with it, the thawing of the snow. Amelia tended her small vegetable garden, planted seeds for the new season. Each day, she found renewed hope. She had done a simple act of kindness during a raging blizzard, and it had blossomed into a life-changing event, bridging a cultural chasm, if only for a moment. For her, that was enough. 3 months later, while checking traps near the creek, Amelia spotted a figure on horseback. Her heart fluttered, half expecting White Crow. But as the rider approached, she recognized many horses. He dismounted, leading another horse loaded with sacks. He explained that White Crow wished for her to have a portion of the buffalo meat they had hunted. Amelia stared in astonishment at the gift, fresh cuts, dried strips hide for leather, all carefully packed. Many horses also handed her a small bundle containing a letter in White Crow's rough English with help from a trader who knew Lakota. The letter read, "Amelia, my children are healthy. I think of your kindness every day. Remember, you are always our friend. May the sky watch over you, Winyan Walwokia." White Crow tears blurred Amelia's vision. She thanked many horses from the bottom of her heart. He only nodded a hint of a smile on his usually stoic face. Then he was off again, vanishing into the wide expanse of the plains, like a spirit of the wind. That night, Amelia placed the letter alongside the beaded moccasins, feeling a profound gratitude that transcended words. She thought of the triplets growing up strong under their father's watchful love, alive because of the simple act she dared to perform in one of the worst blizzards in memory. There, in the heart of the Dakota Territory, amid howling winds and precarious truce, two worlds had touched for a fleeting moment. In that moment, a father reclaimed his children. A stranger earned a name of honor, and the seeds of empathy took root in a harsh frontier. Though she did not know exactly what the future held, Amelia Farnsworth, a woman once crushed by loss, had found a purpose, renewed a circle of kinship that transcended prejudice and fear. And she would never forget the night 3 tiny Lakota infants arrived at her doorstep, how that single twist of fate unlocked the deep well of compassion in her soul. The memory of it stayed with her forever, echoing in every sunrise and sunset across the endless plains, reminding her that hope could take root in even the coldest, most desolate storms of life. Thank you for joining me on the harrowing journey of Amelia Farnsworth and the Lakota triplets she rescued one fateful winter night. Through sacrifice, bravery, and compassion, they bridged the gap between two worlds in the untamed frontier, proving that even in the harshest conditions, the spark of humanity can blaze like a welcoming fire in the darkest storm. If this story of resilience and unity moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate heartfelt Wild West dramas. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more captivating stories that illuminate the power of courage, kindness, and hope. Together, let's keep these tales alive, reminders that even in our modern world, we can forge bonds of understanding and empathy that stand stronger than any frontier fence. Thank you, and until next time, safe travels.